Hi, my name is Nick. Welcome to a presentation about a longitudinal study. This talk today is part of my Humboldt Foundation Fellowship that I did in London, UK. My research was part of the Long Gold Project, a longitudinal study on the development of musical abilities based in the UK and Germany. First of all, this isn't about actual survival, but about students staying engaged with a musical activity. But more about that in a minute. First, I will talk about the research on musical engagement and how we initially came up with the idea of investigating musical survival. Then, I want to show how we conducted our study using a large sample from 2 countries. The next part will be about results, which are usually presented as survival and hazard rates. I really like this as a title for a results section, but I will explain what's behind this later on. I will then show some models that help us finding explanatory variables, and eventually I will discuss what we did, what we found, and what we think should follow this investigation. Why did I ever stop making music is a question that probably many people ask themselves at some point of time, if they ever engaged in any musical activity, of course. Typically, people with a middle class background in Western society start learning an instrument and join an orchestra or band when they are 8 to 12 years old. We also know that many children are already excited about learning an instrument at the age of 6 or 7. While there are some people who keep engaging with music for a long time, many stop practicing music at some point during childhood or adolescence. The question is, who will survive musically, which in this case means staying engaged in their musical activities while growing up. Engaging in musical activities of any kind can have positive consequences in many areas. For instance, musical engagement and shaping musical abilities are important for the development of various traits and skills in children. Making music with others helps young people in terms of identity development and also helps them cope with issues that occur while growing up. These positive effects are a major motivation for parents, music instructors, and school teachers to encourage continuous engagement of their children and students. But sometimes children are not supported, do not feel motivated for various reasons. Thus, a lot of research is dedicated to investigating why people stop making music. Taking a closer look at musical trajectories, we often find that some people quit making music in the transition from adolescence to adulthood, usually when they start working or go to university. Others quit making music at an earlier age, usually when they move from primary to secondary schools. The factors influencing premature dropouts have been reviewed to offer suggestions that may help teachers prevent losing students. The most common reasons are socioeconomic factors, loss of motivation, and loss of support. Several studies indicated that psychological factors such as personality traits and cognitive or affective abilities are involved in the decision to stop playing music. Also, demographics like age and gender were good predictors for musical dropouts, as indicated by the analysis of Swidlick and Boulaya. To investigate the trajectories of musical activities and dropouts, longitudinal data and suitable statistical data analysis methods are needed. One promising technique is the survival analysis, which we wanted to apply to answer the following research questions. First, how many students engage in musical activities during adolescence? Second, who will stop making music and when? For the second research question, we will take into account individual difference factors. And third, which factors can explain who will survive puberty without giving up music making? And as I already told you, we luckily have a longitudinal study running called the Long Gold Project. From the comprehensive set of tests and questionnaires that are part of the test battery used in the longitudinal study, we decided to include age, gender, intelligence, and personality, as these factors have been highlighted as important within the literature. Additionally, we chose to use factors particularly related to music that are central part of the longitudinal study, taking into account music-related factors such as musical home environment, the type of instrument that is played, and attitudes toward music, like the theory of musicality. A total of 3,303 individuals participated in the longitudinal study between the years 2015 and 2019. They were recruited from 4 secondary schools in the UK and 8 secondary schools in Germany. All of them participated in the study at least once and only while they were between 10 and 17 years old. Out of these, 962 individuals participated twice, 55 3 times, 47 4 times, and 7 5 times in total. So how did the study actually take place? Researchers visit school each year at around the same time to test pupils in the natural school setting. Participants are tested in class groups, usually in the school's computer labs during normal school hours. Participants are instructed to work at their own pace, and a testing session takes about 90 minutes. These are the locations of the schools in the UK and Germany. I guess you might know some of the cities, especially the famous Altenstadt, which is a rural city close to Frankfurt, and this previous picture is from Altenstadt. These are the measurements that are part of the long goal test battery. We use the Concurrent Musical Activity Self-Report Inventory, CCM, which assesses the degree of musical activity and active music making. Musicality was assessed using the Goldsmith's Musical Sophistication Index. Of particular interest for this study were the items asking for the musical instrument that students played at the age when they started playing an instrument or singing. To assess the level of musical activity in children's homes, we constructed a new self-report inventory called Musical Home Environment, MHE, on the basis of the data collected in the first year of the longitudinal project. Items ask about the musical activities of other peoples living in the same household, for common musical activities at home, parents' encouragement and support with musical practice, the presence of a range of musical playback devices, and the attendance of musical events with family members. The Theories of Musicality questionnaire TOM was used to assess pupils' attitudes toward the development of musical abilities. Personality was assessed using a very brief Big Five measure, and we used the MyIQ test, a computerized adaptive matrix reasoning test, to assess general intelligence. So, here's the cool part. I would like to take a minute to talk about the survival analysis. Survival analysis is a tool that can take missing data into account. It therefore holds an advantage over other longitudinal analytical methods for our purpose. Compared to regression analysis, the dependent variable is not continuous, but instead represents the time unit until an event occurs. Usually, an event is a binary item that gives information about whether something happened or not. An example related to the aim of the current study could be the time interval between which a student plays in a band before they decide to stop playing in the band. The event variable is dropping out of the band, while the survival time is the time during which the student played actively in the band until they stopped. The data is censored if the student did not drop out by the time the investigation ends. In this case, we cannot say whether the event ever occurs, since it might happen after the time of the investigation. The purpose of this study is to examine whether or not a pupil stayed musically active during his or her time in the longitudinal study. So, survival analysis can provide an informative view of the survival over time, or in the present case, indicate how long pupils stay musically active, and the corresponding hazard rate indicates the likelihood of the occurrence of a certain event at a certain time. In our case, dropping out of a musical activity at a certain age. The binary dependent variable, dropout event, no dropout event, was computed from the binary items of the CCM measure. First, a musical activity variable was computed to indicate if a pupil engaged in any of the 5 possible musical activities. Using this variable, a second variable of interest, namely dropout, was computed to indicate whether a participant had previously engaged but then stopped all musical activity at a certain time. The time variable of interest was the age of the children, ranging from 10 to 17 years, and survival analysis in the current study were carried out using the survival package in R. For the first analysis, we used the dropout variable. The results show that almost half of all music-making children keep engaging with musical activities until they turn 17 years old. The survival trajectory on the left-hand side of the figure indicates that the number of musically engaged pupils decreases rapidly when they are 15 to 17 years old, while the hazard rate on the right-hand side supports the finding that the most likely age to drop out of musical activities is between 15 and 17, with a peak at age 17. In the next step, gender was used as a grouping variable, giving us 2 separate survival curves and hazard rates for female and male pupils. The figures suggest that girls stay musically engaged for longer, as indicated by the green curve on the left-hand graph. The hazard rates on the right-hand graph show that boys are less likely to drop out of musical activities at the age of 16. To answer the question, which individual aspects influence whether pupils drop out of musical activities, several factors were used to predict the dropout variable in generalized linear mixed models. In the first step, the age of participants and their individual factors were taken into account. Following the evidence from the empirical literature, predictor variables were included in 5 steps, starting with the variable age, followed by rather stable traits, intelligence, and personality, then MHE and TOM. Eventually, a model backfitting approach was employed to identify the subset of predictors explaining most of the variance in the musical dropout variable without overfitting the model. We can see the older participants become, the greater the risk of dropping out. The negative associations between MHE and dropout indicates that a less strong musical home environment of participants makes dropping out of musical activities more likely. Emotional stability was included as a predictor, but seems less important as indicated by the p-value. In a second step, the importance of all variables was tested in a cross-sectional comparison, which includes all individuals that engaged in music. One advantage of this is that the data is modeled independent of age. Hence, the focus is on predictors that are important across the adolescent period. The same steps as before were applied, then a stepwise regression analysis with a backward selection method was used to identify the best model. The final model shows that in addition to the musical home environment, theory of musicality and the personality trait conscientiousness are significant predictors. The TOM indicates that the more participants think of music as an entity and the more conscientious they are, the more likely they are to drop out of musical activities. Again, the strongest predictor was MHE. Following the results, we would like to offer a short summary and an outlook for future studies. The results from the survival analysis show that about 50% of those who engage in musical activities drop out by the time they turn 17 years old, which is in line with findings from previous studies. The rates of musical dropouts start to increase when children turn 15 years old, which is about 2 years after the start of puberty, where many physiological and social changes happen in their lives. Furthermore, this is around the age where students might have tried out various leisure time activities and may settle for a specific one like athletics, while at the same time neglecting others like music. Although female pupils are more likely to stay musically engaged until they are 15 years old, the degrees of their engagement is even more drastic when they are 15 and 16 years old, whereas the curve of the male pupils looks more like a linear downward trend starting at the age of 10. These results should be regarded with caution, however, since fewer boys than girls participated in the study and there were no boys over the age of 16. Individual factors like personality seem to explain the likelihood of musical dropout to some degree. The finding that more conscientious pupils are more likely to drop their musical activities might appear surprising. However, it could be argued that more conscientious students focus on school, learning, and their academic achievement and are therefore more likely to drop out of leisure activities, such as music, in favor of their studies. The musical environment at home is another important factor that influences musical engagement. The presence of musical instruments at home, the frequency of musical activities, and even listening to music as a family can contribute to a more motivated and longer-lasting engagement with music. Despite contributing numerous findings, the longitudinal method used for this study has its limitations. First, the sample is skewed towards younger participants. However, because survival analysis takes censored data into account, the results still provide valuable insights. Nevertheless, future studies might want to take a closer look at older children to investigate the dropout of students at age 16 and 17. Second, only a proportion of pupils participated more than once in a longitudinal study. To reveal more comprehensive trajectories, participants should be tested for a longer time. Third, the dropout variable was computed based on the items of the concurrent musical activity inventory. This variable was sufficient for all purposes, but future studies might want to include items that focus on the actual dropout event and incorporate questions on reasons for quitting. In sum, the current study has revealed factors that influence active engagement with music during adolescence and showed that the risk of dropping out of musical activities is highest between 15 and 17 years. One of the most promising factors found was the musical home environment. These insights may help prevent future generations of students from asking themselves the same old question, why did I ever stop making music? Before I end my talk, I would like to seize the moment to thank the whole Long Goal team. A study like this cannot be done without a team of dedicated people. You can see them on this team picture taken at the German Music Psychology Conference in 2019. If you have any more questions, you can email me by using the QR code. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.